My name is Carl Erickson, and I'm the author of 3 books: The Blood Cries Out, a mystery novel for older audiences, and 2 books for children, To Pay Mice and Tristan's Travels, both children's books illustrated by my wife, Kimberly. If you're thinking about being a writer, but you don't quite know where to begin, this presentation is for you. I'm going to bring out 7 main points or recommendations for your consideration for the writing process as well as the post-writing process. I'd like to begin with a quote from Flannery O'Connor. "Fiction is about everything human, and we are made of dust. And if you scorn getting yourself dusty, then you shouldn't try to write fiction. It's not a grand enough job for you." And I think that's a great quote because it emphasizes the need to connect with your audience and to connect with your characters as well in a really deep way. So to begin with, I'd like to make this suggestion, number 1, that new writers avoid self-publishing. I know this is easier said than done. It's becoming more and more frequent for writers to take this route. And in fact, my Blood Cries Out is published through a hybrid publisher, and it's certainly convenient to go that route, but I suggest to listeners that it, in the long run, is not in your best interest, usually to pursue that. It's better to go with a mainline publishing house. You lose so much in the process of going with a non-traditional publisher. You lose the marketing ability. You lose getting into the bookstores, the mainline bookstores oftentimes. And you also lose a certain degree of polishing or editing with regards to your work. Even if you do hire a professional editor, it's likely not going to be quite as good as it would be if it had come out of a major publishing house. Number 2, understand your audience. As we spoke about earlier, it's so critical to understand what they're looking for and why, and to not alienate your audience unnecessarily. I joke around with regarding my first novel that I managed to alienate both Catholics and non-Catholics with regards to the Blood Cries Out. And it's humorous, but in a sense it's true. I don't have time to go into it here, but you need to be sure that you don't alienate your audience inadvertently through your writing techniques or style. Next, if you are self-publishing, consider at least hiring a really accomplished editor. It's going to be expensive. It's going to hurt the bank account a little bit, but I guarantee it's going to be worth it for you. Next, beware hiring a publicist. It can be very tempting to bring someone on board to help you promote your work, a so-called professional that can reach a wide group of people and make you feel like you're really blasting the news of your book's release to everyone. But oftentimes it's more of an ego trip than it is a sound financial decision in the publishing process. Next, stay grounded when it comes to book promotion. Avoid doing things you may regret later. Next, beware of too much self-promotion. Let's face it, when people incessantly promote their goods on social media, they can become kind of annoying. It's best to use that social media promotion to a reasonable extent, not to go overboard on that. Keep reading, writing, and practicing your faith. I mention faith here, and it may surprise some, but I suggest that faith is an important part in the process. If we have a spiritual dimension, and we acknowledge that spiritual dimension, then I believe that we really do become better writers. And after all, if we're closer to our Creator, then we're closer to creating. Take my word for it. It's helpful, but it's one of those things that's better experienced than explained. I'd like to, at this point, quote from a piece that I wrote for Seattle Pacific University. It's entitled "Art and the Christian Gospel," and this was published about 15 years ago, I believe. The words of Christian writers and theologians from C.S. Lewis to Dietrich Bonhoeffer still give us much to consider and discuss. From Michelangelo to Handel, our Christian heritage is also replete with the finest artists and composers who have ever lived. This rich Christian perspective plays a vital role within our culture. It is our responsibility to ensure that this legacy endures and continues. Perhaps the best book on writing that I have found is Bird by Bird by Anne Lamott. I strongly recommend this book, and this is a great book to read. I'd like to conclude this presentation with a quote from Bird by Bird. 30 years ago, my older brother, who was 10 years old at the time, was trying to get a report on birds written that he had 3 months to write, which was due the next day. We were out at our family cabin in Bolinas, and he was at the kitchen table close to tears, surrounded by binder paper and pencils and unopened books on birds, immobilized by the hugeness of the task ahead. My father sat down beside him, put his arm around my brother's shoulder, and said, "Bird by bird, buddy. Just take it bird by bird." And that's so important when we're writing a large piece, whether it's an essay or a novel. If I can leave you with one piece of great advice, just take your writing bird by bird, step by step. Thank you.